put that in the CIP.
The voice.
All right. Welcome to the October 6th, 2021 Planning Board meeting. We'll start with a roll call.
Tom Alberti.
Present?
Timothy Moore.
Here.
Laurie Millette.
Here.
Karen Robinson.
Here?
Max Dobson.
Here.
Greg Talon.
Here.
Bill Coy is not.
He's excused.
John Cashel.
Here.
And me. That's it.
All right, very good.
We're good.
Review the minutes from the last meeting.
Make a motion to approve the September 15th, 2021 Planning Board minutes.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Abstained? Nay? All right. Motion passes, 5-0-0. All right. So tonight the focus is, we've been talking about this, is workshop. We are, what is our hard date for having all of our warrant articles and other recommendations in? Does anybody have that? I should have that.
There's a schedule.
Yeah.
December?
Exactly, but it's sort of mid-January.
Okay.
Isn't it December?
I think the,
Last day to post and publish,
All right, and then
first hearing.
they have to be turned into the town clerk no later than the 5th Tuesday before the March town meeting,
Oh,
I think is the algorithm.
Okay.
And so that puts you into late January.
okay.
But, you know, obviously, the town clerk would appreciate it if we don't go down there 4:29
Exactly.
on the Tuesday required.
I'll pass it off to Karen. Karen, go. You get in trouble. All right, so then, and then procedurally, that also requires us to have multiple hearings and votes on the, is it two?
Two, I think,
Two,
yeah.
yeah.
Two. Yep.
So, two votes. So we can get right into it, and then we can also talk about any other recommendations, but I know that, John, you presented some information to us, and then Tim went the full mile, which, again, well, I'll say this publicly, in between the last meeting and now, Tim drafted some excellent language and letters. Those were signed and sent off. One was regarding the traffic light at the proposed
Good.
Convenient MD and Walmart intersection.
Yep.
The one, and then something we had talked about, but Tim was, again, very descriptive and excellent language regarding the intersection right after that where the Rite Aid is in Westville and 125, and also regarding the turn-in to the proposed convenience store at,
Store. Yep.
is that 2 Plaistow Road? So,
To Main Street.
2 Main Street. And then the last thing, was there another letter? Two?
I think we drafted a letter to the Board of Selectmen recommending they pay RPC dues.
Okay.
I think
Oh,
that was
yes,
the other
yes.
Yep, so thank you very much, Tim, for those letters. Those have been sent. I guess it's just, John, when do you know, in your experience, when do you think we would get some notification or response?
From DOT?
Yeah,
Probably within a month, you
Okay.
know. And if we don't hear from them, we'll inquire.
yeah.
Yeah, just get a hold of them.
You know, interestingly enough, I was looking at the town cesspool page, and it mentioned that there was I saw, no, actually, it was Rockingham Alert, but there was a pretty good accident at the Westville Road and 125
yes.
intersection. I don't know how it went down, but it was a 3-car accident, airbags, like ambulances, so
Yep.
certainly a challenging spot. But, Tim, do you want to talk about your proposal and sort of dive into that?
Yeah, I guess we can do that. We had, the general topic is private road versus public road. And our existing ordinance says that all new subdivision roads, whether they're residential, commercial or industrial, shall be private roads. And as we have reviewed a few newer commercial and industrial subdivisions, that probably isn't the best solution for many of them. And so that was kind of the start of the change. So you'll see the second paragraph down, modify paragraph A to state all new residential subdivision roads shall be public roads. And then the rest of that paragraph, which included the other commercial industrial subdivisions, was proposed to be scratched out. Then the existing paragraph B does talk about public-private roads in housing for older persons. And that's case, the best case is the Chandler Place. And essentially what that says is that those can be private roads, unless, the only exception is if they connect two existing public roads, then that road has to be a public road, can't be private. And that's been in there for a while. So I think that still seems reasonable. Then my suggestion was to add a new paragraph C. Now, take off my glasses so I can read it. All new roads shall be constructed as public roads in all commercial and industrial subdivisions. For roads expected to carry very heavy loads, the new roads may require construction standards that exceed those for public roads. New roads in commercial and industrial subdivisions may be designated as private roads with a note on the subdivision and/or site plan that states all summer and winter maintenance shall be done at the property owner's expense. No performance bond will be required for such private roads. Then the note there says we still need to decide what to do about PRD roads, whether they're public or private. And I guess maybe the classic case, which is fairly new, is at Snows Brook, where the public road goes out to the big cul-de-sac, and then it's a private road from the cul-de-sac through the actual PRD. And because that was constructed as a private road, there isn't the, not the frontage or there's some other things that are kind of unique to the PRD. So in talking over with D, I think we decided that when we modify paragraph A, it should say, rather than all new residential subdivision, should say all new residential and PRD subdivision roads shall be public roads. And I think that's probably the road that we, pardon the pun, the road we want to go down.
And just like to pipe in, I agree with that
Yeah.
wholeheartedly, because the residents of a private road are eventually going to want it to be a public road, and, then it becomes a political situation all the time. So if you approve them all as public, you avoid that.
Yeah.
Any other board discussion at this time on that?
So they have to be built to the town's standards, though, right? They can't
They
be-
do,
Right, you can't change them.
right.
Even if it's a private road?
Even the private roads have to
Okay.
be constructed.
And we're only talking about commercial/industrial. And then the language that Tim's proposing, for commercial, heavy commercial, we can require them to build, even though it's going to be private, build them to a higher standard than what we require for residential.
Okay.
That's a good point. How many other subdivisions do we have or developments that have private roads now? Does anybody have that in
Is
there?
Tewksbury still
Yeah.
Private?
Tewksbury Meadows is one, that's still private.
What about Chandler?
Is that off of 108 where the commercial buildings are?
No, it's off,
No, it's Kingston.
off Old County,
The lower part of Old County?
next to where Stonebridge
Yep.
condos are. That's one.
And then the Chandler one, what's that one?
Chandler Place is private,
Yeah,
and that fell under the older persons.
older thing, yeah, right.
Village Way private?
Village Way? No, I don't think so. I think that, in fact, I think they just
It's the one on the corner.
Just accepted that as a public road
But it started out
within the
as-
last year.
Private.
Yeah.
Right.
So I guess that's the challenge we have, right? So for the most part, there's been, several instances of roads that were initially private,
And then they went
and
to,
then through conversation, probably even the one I've been informed where I live,
yep,
at one time was private, and then ultimately it's the Board of Selectmen's decision about whether that road can become public.
Yeah.
And then it sounds like the challenge after that is, how was it constructed? Did it meet all the standards? Is it now a road that we would have otherwise had issue with?
right.
Does anybody see any instances where it would benefit either the community, the homeowner or homeowners association, and the town for it to remain private, even if it's a residential?
Well, we wouldn't be on the hook for plowing.
Yeah.
I mean, there aren't that many of them. That's a blessing for a town, not to have too many private roads that are, say, grandfathered private roads.
It would all have to be built accordingly.
But you want to avoid, at all costs, creating more of them. So every subdivision the board entertains, this is my advice to you, because it really does turn into a real big problem for communities. So, whether it's a small road or whatever, approve them as public ways and make sure they're built in accordance with our construction standards for public ways, because eventually it does become a political thing. And, I know, one town that has a sizable private road, everything's private in it. And a lot of selectmen get elected from that particular development, And their mission is to try to transform that private road and all the utilities into a public road and public utilities. And it wasn't approved that way. So it's a bone of contention. It creates a lot of political turmoil that can be
Is
avoided.
that kind of a conflict of interest for them to vote on?
Yeah, I would say so. But
So that,
Clearly a conflict.
so we're just trying to cut off the inevitable potential political issue and the potential that it becomes a public road. But is there any, and listen, I'm just playing devil's advocate here, and you guys have a lot more experience with this, but is there any valid reason that we have to consider to not,
Not require
eliminate the
public-
private road construction? And that's just, I'm just asking that out loud so that if anybody has any input.
Well, residents have won the battle relative to trash being picked up. If a community does provide that for their residents, they end up having to provide that for the private residents too. That battle's been lost. So you could have a private development and, for years, communities thought, yeah, well, we won't have to pick up the trash, we won't have to plow the roads or anything. But you end up having to pick up the trash or make provision for it, even, if it is a multifamily. Multifamily developments are different, but if it's a townhouse or a single-family private development, you're gonna have to go in there as a community if you're collecting trash, along curbside trash as a service. You're gonna have to go in and collect that from those type of developments too.
So wouldn't like a gated community have to be private?
Yeah. If that particular community wants to stay completely private and handle their own trash, that's one thing, but if they start clamoring for trash pickup,
So we're
the
requiring
community's
the
gonna have
service
to.
of the town has to be able to have access into the development.
Is there any benefit for a developer to
just
want a
do that.
private road? I mean, other than to eliminate, to sort of control that stretch of road and eliminate public use, I guess, but.
I mean, there definitely could be a situation where you actually have a private road, and it's a true gated community, so that there is a gate, there's a gatekeeper,
Yeah.
those do exist, and that's the way they want them. If there's a hard press for that type of development that comes before us, we just have to make sure that it's documented in the black and white, and it's recorded, it's on the plan, it's on the deeds, and everything else, that it's a private road, and it shall remain private in perpetuity, so that it doesn't become a political issue.
So
Would they have to go to the zoning board?
What's that?
Would they have to ask for a variance?
Well, that's the question.
It's, once it's in the deed, and, you lift it up, it's right here, and
Okay.
it's on the plan that's recorded, it's right here.
Okay.
It's really an impossible argument for them to change.
Okay.
Well, I think, and also echoing what Karen's saying, is if we write this article and it gets passed, and then just say a subdivision goes in and they are hoity-toity and they want a gate and so on, they would then need a variance to be big,
To
to make,
transform a public into a private?
yeah. No, to build
No,
and
to
just
build
create
it.
it as private, because if we write this warrant article as is, where it states all new residential subdivision roads shall be public roads, then in essence, we're saying you can't have a private road.
That's right. That's what.
They'd have to
that's
go
what
get
we're
a
saying.
variance, I assume?
Yeah. Yeah, they
would-
could
yeah,
come
I would
in
think so.
with,
Could they?
Yeah.
they could come in with a proposal that, we don't have on the books and present it, and it may make all the sense in the world, and then there'd be a provision for it. They'd have to go to the ZBA.
Right.
Because we
That's
can't
that was my
change
question.
zoning. So they go to the ZBA and get a special exception issued for that particular type of development.
But once I've done that and it's on the deed, there's no changing back to the public.
You know what does happen with these? If they're well-managed and well-financed, it's not a problem, but these developments, those fees, those homeowner fees, a lot of them become, outrageously expensive, and then, the maintenance falls
a big
apart.
thing.
The roadways are usually the first thing to go, and trying to get everybody together to pitch in for a betterment cost, and people don't have that kind of money, the roads just fall apart. I mean, you see it in the inner core cities, there's tons of private ways in real affluent communities in the 128 belt, and you drive down them and you think you're on the surface of the moon. And because the parties of responsibility can't come together
Right.
to, pitch in. I mean, I can tell you some horror stories that were they're gravel roadways, and, the potholes and everything. You actually need a Jeep to, people
It's,
won't agree.
so it seems like the board is pretty supportive of this as written. Is there anybody that, like you said, I threw it out there just to play devil's advocate, if anybody could come up with a reasonable idea why we shouldn't do this?
And the other thing is the industrial roads being private, and that's what they want, great, it's fine, but you're not dealing with, a lot of residents that are, paying taxes and they want what everybody else is getting. With commercial properties, if they want a private road, they want it for a specific purpose, and it's usually for security. They want to be able to control their environment 24/7.
No.
So we
So
can
this
also,
doesn't apply to the commercial or the industrial?
No, it exempts, this proposes to exempt.
Paragraph C would be
Would be for exempting them.
for commercial and industrial.
Which is fine. They're not going to run for office, and, we're not going to hear, the complaints from them. That's what they want, and, they'll maintain it.
does anybody see any, so I think we talked it out that should there ever be a situation where someone, a residential community does go in and they want their own private road, they would have to ask for a variance, which is fine. And then, anything in the new language in paragraph C, does anybody have any I was thinking about the part that says for roads expected to carry very heavy loads. I don't know if we
Right.
need to tighten that up a little bit, but
Heavy trucks.
just so we establish some standards, because I agree, if it is a public road and it's getting heavy industrial use, that's a burden on the town.
I think the way it's written is fine, because when we're dealing with such roads as that are being proposed, our consulting engineer would advocate, and it's a standard recommendation from a consulting engineer that, a 2-inch base course and a 1.5-inch overlay, which is, standard pavement surfaces, for an industrial road, that's just not enough.
Yeah.
It usually calls for 2-inch base, a 2-inch base on top of that base, and then a 1.5-inch or 2-inch finish course for heavy trucking type of roadways.
So if we say something along the lines for roads expected to carry very heavy loads and, frequent use, some sort of, even if it's not necessarily heavy loads, but there's trucks going back and forth all day long, that could take a toll as well.
What John's saying is that our engineer would pull that out when the plan came to us
Yeah.
to be evaluated, that there was going to be
Sure.
heavy loads, and that the road material needs to be changed or upgraded to support that use, correct, John?
Yeah, subdivision regulations too, a lot of them do call out the different types of roadway.
Right.
So a commercial grade roadway would be, instead of a 12-inch gravel base compacted, be 18 inches
So
compacted.
the way it's written is fine, because
Yeah.
it gets across the point.
Yeah.
And then we rely on the engineer to propose what type of road needs to be put in there.
And especially if any of these become private, they're gonna wanna build them right the first time, otherwise, they're just gonna end up repairing the road all the time.
Yep.
Well, it does say here, the new roads may require construction standards that exceed those for public roads.
Yep.
Yeah, for those roads that are constructed as public
Right,
in commercial and industrial subdivisions.
right.
The other thing that happens today, Mr. Chairman, is that everything is engineered. It's not like 50 years ago where, plans really weren't engineered to handle drainage properly, and the subsurfaces weren't graded properly, they weren't compacted. So, you can always tell an older industrial roadway, they're usually falling apart because they weren't constructed properly in the first place. But today, everything's engineered, and it's totally important for the amount of money you're investing to do it right and for the road to last. And, you do have all the inspections going on.
All right, so everybody's pretty comfortable with paragraph C?
Yep.
And then going on to Tim's note, how do we feel about PRDs?
I thought we were going to add that to paragraph A.
Yeah,
All new residential and PRD subdivision roads shall be public roads. Is that correct, Tim?
yeah, I think in
So that's,
talking over with Dee, we kind of decided that probably was
Yep.
the best approach. And mostly the reason for the note was I wanted to make sure we didn't forget about
right, the PRD.
putting PRD someplace, so there wasn't, a gap or a loophole in there somehow or other.
Is there, and speaking of that, is there any other construction situation that would require us to sort of specifically identify it within these two paragraphs? Just, again, throwing it out there to cover all bases. Because everything either qualifies as residential or commercial, industrial, or PRD effectively, right?
What, I did have one question. What happens when there's a driveway that is actually used for maybe three different development, three houses?
3 houses. Well,
Does that become a road, or is that still just a driveway, even though it could go for?
yeah.
I mean, what is the-
The fire department is not happy with multiple houses
On one.
off of, on a driveway.
Right,
We have I think we've had some subdivisions where we've approved two, or like a duplex. But with two, I mean, you can manage the signage with two fairly easily, I think, so
Okay.
that's not too bad, but, yeah, I mean, we should discourage that.
Right.
We should be,
Those are effectively still driveways though, right? So private and,
Yeah,
yeah.
okay.
So is it like a sign right away? Because I assume the first part of the driveway has to be on someone's property, right? It's not common area, it's one property or another.
Well, if it were a case where the lots were single-family lots, and
Yep.
they-
Right.
then, yeah, there'd have to be some kind of easement language in there.
Easement.
I think it comes up more for like condos and townhouses.
We have
Yeah,
multiple,
Kind of the property itself is
Right.
common, all common property, so you don't have the
Legally
easement
speaking,
situation.
only the Board of Selectmen have the legal authority to allow for a driveway to become a street.
Okay.
Yes, and they can slip in. Sometimes they do, and it's a mystery
No,
how it
that's
happens. But
why I asked.
it's the Board of Selectmen statutorily by state law, they're the only ones that have the authority to accept a way as a public way.
Okay.
Yeah, and so if a driveway becomes a street, check with your selectmen.
do we know any?
I don't
There
think
are a
so.
lot of right-of-ways.
That's why Bill's
people
not at the
don't
meeting
know
tonight, yeah.
about it. It's very true. There's a lot of right-of-ways people don't know.
Yeah.
They creep up.
And it's amazing too how some of these driveways become plowed, just like public ways are plowed. That starts causing problems.
Yeah.
That kind of pyramids itself, snowballs.
So, it sounds like everybody's pretty comfortable with this, that we're in agreement. It just tightens up some of the language and sort of heads off the potential for the use of private roads, which we know can be tricky. So the intent sounds like it benefits the common good of the community. I think if we had to put this to a vote right now, we'd all be comfortable with it. If there's,
Yep.
yeah, all right. Good.
So we could schedule this for a public hearing if we wanted to get that far with this particular one tonight, you think? Or you want to wait until we get the whole package together?
Yeah, I think,
The whole package.
I think that once we sort of work through what we're looking at,
Right.
I think the goal for the evening is to come to a point, and, you know, that's great, because Tim's got the experience, and I think some of the things we talk about tonight are just going to be conceptual, and yay or nay, should we explore it? Should we write something toward it?
Yeah.
This looks like it's just about signed, sealed, and delivered. So I think by the end of the evening, we'll have an idea of what's ready for what, and then what's the plan and schedule for those. But,
Very good, Tim.
Tim, are these sort of a different topic where you have the cut-through line and,
Yeah.
okay, you want to speak to those?
Well, the next one, again, is referring to subdivision roads. And I have read multiple times, somewhere in either zoning and/or subdivision, there's language that states all subdivision lots or all new lots or something to the effect must be on existing roads. And of course, if you're doing a subdivision, you don't have an existing road, you have a proposed road. So that requires the applicant to get a variance because it's not an existing road, which is kind of silly. So the intent was to change that to, say, existing or proposed subdivision roads or something like that. But I couldn't, for the life of me, find that. So we'll
Add a new one.
we'll look again. That was very frustrating not to be able to find that.
You didn't have that in your head?
I thought I could go almost to the page and find it.
Sometimes you disappoint us, Tim, sometimes.
Yeah.
Good job.
It was probably in between naps.
We're entitled to those.
Yeah. Anyway, we'll track that down.
Yeah, because you would say that any new development is, could potentially in some way be in violation of the
regular route
regulations, yeah, exactly. So I think, so what you're saying is you believe that the language is there. It probably should be cleaned up just because it's an oversight and there's a better way to
We'll look
state
for
what
it.
we
We'll look
understand.
for it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is there a digital file of the zoning ordinances? Because you could do like a Control F and search for the phrase like subdivision requirements.
Yeah, I mean, I have the Word docs.
It would just save you
Yeah.
time. You could just search that phrase and everything that had that phrase in it would come up.
Yeah, I don't think to use that too often because so much of the language is repetitive.
Yeah,
You know,
you have 20
500 occurrences.
122 matches.
Right, exactly.
But it narrows it down from reading the whole thing over and over.
Well, yeah. So, yeah, that's always a help.
Okay, what was the next one?
Okay, so then the next one, again, as you recall, last year, we replaced I think it was their wetlands ordinance, we call it, with this natural resources ordinance.
Yep.
One which Concom felt was a better choice, and so we proposed it, and it did pass.
Yep.
And essentially, it states that when there's infringement into the wetlands buffers, which are defined in a table in the ordinance, the remedy is to apply for a conditional use permit. And then it gives conditions when that's appropriate, what's involved with the conditional use permit, and et cetera, et cetera. But what we found out is that there's no mention of residential infringement. So we need to
Add to that.
do something about
Yep.
that. And so there's a couple, a couple cases that come up, and I think we're probably going to see one of them at our next meeting. And the applicant, with Palmer Woods behind here. And so the applicant met several times with Concom and really eliminated a lot of the buffer infringements. There are a couple road crossings. So anyway, so for cases where there's a subdivision and there are infringements on residential lots, or infringement on for residential structures, as long as you're doing a subdivision anyway, it's really not too much extra to do a conditional use permit, which requires a public hearing. It can be, coincident with the subdivision, public hearing, and so forth. And we've seen a few of those where we kind of take time out from the site plan review and do a conditional use permit approval and so forth. However, there are cases where homeowner wants to put a swimming pool or add a deck or whatever. And in doing that, there is some infringement into the buffer. And it seems like a lot of work for everyone to require a conditional use permit for that. So maybe the better remedy there is for the applicant to apply for variance, which has been the remedy all along.
Anyway, right.
Anyway. So, I think maybe the variance is the better approach on that one, but I just wanted to toss it out. I think it's something that we should clean up in some manner or other, but, so I think those are the cases.
If I could, I'd go along with the variance because a building inspector has the authority to issue a building permit for a house and a duplex.
Yeah.
And if we encroach on that authority, then we may be interfering with what the state statutes provide for that person. It clearly has the authority, and that's all they have the authority for, without other permits being issued.
Yeah.
Hey, to back up 1 second, I did find that missing tooth of language.
Oh, good.
It's 235-8, subsection A. It reads real quickly, each existing lot or new lot or lots created by a subdivision for a single-family dwelling unit must have a separate driveway that connects to a Class 5 or better road. Is that what you're, and it's faded language in the copy that I have, so
Yeah.
it's probably elusive that way. But that was at 235-8A.
Yeah. Okay. So that's in subdivision, which I think most years, I mean, we try to get through all the zoning first because there is that pretty strict schedule to get zoning out to town meeting.
Right.
We kind of postpone subdivision and site plan regulation changes, which is fine, but sometimes we get busy and forget to do them.
Yep.
So depending on how many of what we discover as we, go through the review, I guess my suggestion would be we kind of do them concurrently, unless it gets to be too much and too confusing. But
John, would you mind rereading that?
Yeah, why don't we
Yeah.
just rewrite it?
Yeah, so this is section
yeah, it's a simple change.
Right.
235-8, and the title of it, Rights of Way Reserve Strips. And it was last amended 6/6/2018. Subsection A, each existing lot or new lot or lots created by a subdivision for a single-family dwelling unit, that's how it reads, must have a separate driveway that connects to a Class 5 or better road. But it doesn't say anything about an existing. So
That's how we change the wording.
in talking about, a subdivision, we approve Class 5 roads or better as standard requirement. That's
Is
a
it necessary to include Class 5 or better existing or proposed road? Or is it just assumed that we're covering existing and proposed?
I would leave it in there, just because it leaves no question that, whatever the existing lot or new lot being created by a subdivision is being created and accessed by a Class 5 or better roadway.
But the road be part of the development,
Yeah, yeah.
so it could be brand new.
Right.
Which is
Yeah.
a little bit different than what Tim's suggesting is that it has to be connected to an existing road.
Yeah, so it doesn't state that.
Right.
That's why we have to rewrite it. But
So you
add
think
it in.
A already sort of covers the bases? It's not saying,
Covers the bases, but I didn't see yet language that would mention that, you know, any lot that's gonna be built, whether it's in a new subdivision or not, it has to be an existing road. What that language is saying that, hey, if it's approved in a subdivision, well, subdivisions, by their definition, are the creation of a new roadway with new lots along that road.
Even if the road is private,
Yeah.
it's still classified as a classified road?
What's that?
It's still classified as a Class 5 road? I thought Class 5 roads were always public roads. No?
Yeah, well, that's the minimum requirement would be the approval of a Class 5 road.
The point I'm making is the Class 5 road is normally a public road. It's not a private way.
Right.
So in a development that has a private way,
Yeah.
you'd be violating that particular rule.
Yeah, I mean, you really can get into the weeds and this stuff in that one document that I referenced in my memo.
Yep.
You know, it's a hard road, and it's always an important document, and that particular publication has been updated.
Yep.
What happens with private roads or gravel roads, if a community has issued building permits and people are living on those roadways and say they're substandard to Class 5 or better,
Yep.
it's really hard for a community to say no to a building permit for an existing lot along such a roadway.
Right, it's already been
Can't.
developed and it's already starting to be
Yeah, what's good for
built
the
on.
goose is good for the gander.
Right.
Usually, you know.
But a
the-
brand-new subdivision, we would look at that and say, according to that
Yeah.
regulation, we'd say, it's not a Class 5 road.
Right.
It doesn't matter whether it's existing or not, it's just not a classified road if it's a private road.
Yeah. North of here, and I'm sure everybody has come across this, in more rural communities, you know, Board of Selectmen by state statute have the authority to allow somebody to build on a non-public way, right-of-way. Go ahead, have at it. You have to maintain the roadway. You know, the owner of the
And that can
property
be done
signs off.
without, that can be done without a variance?
Yeah. And then-
Really?
Yeah, and the property owner signs off, it's
That's
their
right.
responsibility.
He signs
You know, if anything happens, any emergency services or whatever, you know, it's up to them to provide their own way out, basically, if they're gonna build on those roadways.
Got it.
Basically, subject to gates and bars, you know, but that's north of here, pretty far. The farther you go, the more you run into that.
Yep.
So for the sake of Tim's
Adding to this.
list, his point 2 or section 2 is likely not necessary. Is that what we're saying? Because it doesn't explicitly state existing road, it just says road, which can be inferred to mean new or proposed or existing?
Yeah, because that's what it is, it's Class 5 or better.
Yeah. So would we come to say that we don't need to take action on his point 2 unless there is something else that we're missing and Tim finds it?
I mean, it's,
Because that
think
sub,
it explains it enough.
235-A, 8A says shared driveways, so maybe it's not.
That's another subject we're gonna be talking about tonight, having to do with ADUs. That's another proposed amendment we'll be talking about.
Yep, okay,
And this particular section is gonna come in handy in that
here
discussion.
we go. All right, so we'll stay on point, try to keep plowing through these. Tim, just to sort of recap what you wrote in the third point about the wetlands buffers. If I'm understanding this correctly in layman's terms, right now, commercial and industrial requires CUP through the planning board to infringe on wetlands buffers or intrude.
yeah.
However, residential zones don't need a CUP, they need a variance.
Well, the ordinance doesn't say.
It doesn't say
It
it.
leaves residential encroachment. It
Yeah.
doesn't mention it one way or the other.
Because if you think about North Ave, we gave them a CUP to cross the wetlands.
Yeah.
Are you stating that we should tighten that up and require a CUP for residential intrusions?
Well, I mean, I think it should be maybe split. If you know the intrusion's going to occur in a new subdivision, then do a CUP, because you're already before the planning board. We already have our engineer reviewing the plan, et cetera, et cetera. If it's just a single lot where a homeowner wants to put a shed or a swimming pool or extend the deck or whatever, and that's, the result of doing that would encroach the in the buffer, then do you really want to make that homeowner require a conditional use permit? Which,
Versus just getting a variance for it.
right, and then who would hold the,
Can you imagine those meetings?
No.
who would hold
I
the,
want to build a deck a foot next to the frog pond.
stranger things have
that's
happened.
no longer
That's
allowed.
right.
So,
Again, I mean, I think the variance for existing homeowners
It's fine.
Yeah.
works better,
Yep.
but we need to specify that in.
okay, that's,
Yeah, and I go along wholeheartedly with the subdivision requiring a CUP.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fine.
yeah,
Yeah. It's
Now-
just the single family in the duplex person,
yeah.
I'd keep that realm of
Yes,
this
just keep that. Yeah.
in the ZBA.
Yep.
Now, I'm just going to throw this out there again because you guys are experienced. The ZBA holds some sort of judicial authority. We don't really. We're more interpreting, but the CUP is in essence a judicial decision, correct? And does one or the other, is one or the other a better mechanism to manage these types of requests, in your opinions?
By zoning, planning board can be the conditional use permit granting authority by the zoning, and it can be specific, the permit granting authority, whether it's for wireless communications towers, or, whatever else. In New Hampshire, the planning board can be the conditional use permit granting authority, just as the ZBA can be the conditional use permit granting authority by zoning. So there are particular instances where the planning board should have jurisdiction
Right.
with granting conditional use permits, and I'll give you a perfect example, subdivisions. Subdivisions are under the purview of the planning board. So a conditional use permit having to do with this wetland buffer issue, I would say that would, the best venue for that would be a concurrent public hearing with the planning board relative to subdivision approval. And we receive input from Conservation Commission, and that's who we would, seek review and their input before we would move towards approving conditional use permit. A conditional use permit in the purview of the ZBA, they could do the same thing. But the applicant, it's really not fair to everybody that's involved that, we have to send you to the ZBA to do what we're really geared up to do. And that's to deal with subdivision regulations. So why send somebody to a board that really doesn't deal with subdivisions in detail like we do and that we're used to doing? Do you agree, Tim?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's one great example. And then the other one's with the commercial. We handle commercial conditional use permits now.
Yeah, it's interesting because would theoretically North Ave have been able to, if you recall, they went in front of the ZBA, got rejected, and something that when we looked at it, we think, hey, that probably made sense to approve that
Yeah.
because now we actually had to give them the CUP to cross the wetlands, whereas the other request didn't.
Yeah.
Would, if we change the language, would that situation could potentially come in front of us? We
Yeah,
could
it
have
would be
granted
with
them?
us. It would be with us, through the town's approval,
Yeah.
because it is a zoning change. Correct, Tim?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Does anybody see any flaws or concerns or weakness in not again, devil's advocate here.
No, I think that it should be required. Oh,
Yeah, it makes complete sense, rational sense to do it that way, in my opinion.
Is the language defined enough to where one applicant with a similar situation doesn't understand and goes in front of the ZBA and has to then be beholden to their decision, whereas the next applicant's gonna come to us and get
The only thing that would be clear, if we go along with our discussion, debate tonight, is for a single-family dwelling unit or a duplex, because those two permits are issued by the building inspector, any CUP having to do with the wetland buffer impact, that would have to go to the ZBA. All decisions of the building inspector can only first be appealed to the ZBA anyway.
right.
So he has the authority to do that, great. We have the statutory authority, exclusive statutory authority for subdivisions. So a wetland buffer issue that's before us as part of a subdivision only makes rational sense that we should be dealing with that. We're the ZBA is going to deal with it, but they're not truly geared up to deal with subdivisions, because subdivisions mainly have to do with subdivision regulations. They don't deal with zoning. We only get subdivisions because they comply with zoning. If a subdivision didn't comply with zoning,
We wouldn't see it.
they'd have to go to the ZBA to get,
Right.
zoning relief. Yeah.
But, and that's what North Ave tried to do. They went to the ZBA first and then came to us, and then they were stuck with what they had.
And then the other thing that's important to realize is that, we're trying to build a strong communication and understanding with the Conservation Commission, and this is a good way to do that, is to deal with the Conservation Commission relative to wetland issues that have to do with subdivisions. And that's one way to do it, to build our relationship up with that group.
Yeah, so everybody feels pretty good about the spirit of what this is saying, the intent, what we're looking to do.
So we're going
And
to leave
then-
it worded like this?
And
so-
then, yeah,
Yeah.
Tim will wordsmith this out into a warrant article, and it will just be some clarification language that defines the CUP role for the planning board with relative to subdivisions, correct?
Yeah.
I think it's really important that this is truly an important amendment to consider.
Yeah.
Good.
The only other thing that we probably might want to look at is the width of the buffer. And I don't know if that needs to be changed or not.
And what's your,
Yeah, how do we?
what's the width requirement right now?
I think it's 75 feet.
And what's your inclination on that?
I don't know, I've only thought about, thinking about if it should change the,
What about thinking?
They vary, but, it will take serious consideration, because some communities, it's 100 feet, some are 75 feet, some are 50 feet, some are
You're going to have to
25.
really word it, I think,
yeah.
As a citizen,
talking about,
I'm all for increasing protections to the impact of the community, whether that be setbacks or, as long as they make sense, but,
What comes in,
so,
I want to change the
what's
50 feet.
a 100-foot buffer between commercial and residential, that actually stands up in court. In this town, there's a standard 50-foot, and it's been working, but some are 100. Where you get into a problem with the 100-foot buffer between commercial